If you're only withdrawing the minimum from your RRIF, you might be setting up a $50,000 tax bill that your family pays after you're gone. And if you've heard the advice to withdraw more, and you followed it without checking the numbers, you may have already cost yourself $2,500 a year in OAS benefits you'll never get back. Both of those things are real. Both are happening to Canadian retirees right now, and they're the reason I want to talk about this today. The problem isn't that Canadians aren't paying attention. The problem is that the advice itself is incomplete. Withdraw more than the minimum sounds smart. In some situations, it is. But applied blindly, it can push your income over the OAS clawback threshold at $93,454, and every dollar passed that costs you 15 cents in benefits. That adds up fast. And on the other side, if you stay at the minimum, your whole retirement, your RRIF balance keeps growing. The mandatory withdrawal percentages increase with age. By the time you're 85, you're forced to take out 8.51% per year, whether you need the money or not. And whatever's left in the RRIF when you die gets taxed as income in your final return, sometimes at the highest marginal rate your province has. So the real question isn't should I withdraw more, it's how much more, and when. That's what this video is actually about. If you're a Canadian retiree who wants to keep every dollar of OAS you're entitled to and still reduce the tax bill your estate will face, stick with me. I'm going to walk you through the math, and I'll show you the withdrawal zone that does both. Let's start with the actual rule, because a lot of people don't know the exact number. The OAS clawback threshold for 2026 is $93,454 in net income. That's the line. If your total income, CPP, OAS, pension, RRIF withdrawals, everything goes over that by even $1, the government takes back 15 cents of OAS for every dollar above the threshold. A $10,000 extra RRIF withdrawal, if it puts you over, costs you $1,500 in OAS that year. And it's not a one-time thing. It resets annually based on your income. So if your RRIF keeps growing and your mandatory withdrawals keep rising, you can find yourself losing OAS year after year without ever meaning to. Now here's where a lot of people misread their situation. They look at their current income, it's well under $93,454, and they think they're fine, but the RRIF minimum isn't fixed. It increases with age. At age 71, the minimum is 5.28% of your January 1st balance. By 80, that's up to 6.82%. At 85, it's 8.51%. At 90, it's 11.92%. So if you have a $300,000 RRIF at age 71, your minimum withdrawal is about $15,840 a year. Add $15,000 in CPP and $8,000 in OAS, and you're at $38,840. Well below the threshold. That feels safe. But now run the same numbers at age 80. That same RRIF, if it grew at even a modest 4% per year while you only took the minimums, could be worth $340,000 or more. The minimum withdrawal at 80 is 6.82%. That's $23,000. Now add CPP and OAS again, and you're looking at total income close to or above $46,000. Still below the threshold, but the gap is shrinking. And by age 85, you may have crossed it without changing a single spending habit. The trap isn't what you see today, it's the trajectory. And there's a second layer to this that's even harder to catch. The OAS clawback gets most of the attention, but if you're in a lower income range and receiving GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, a larger RRIF withdrawal doesn't just reduce a benefit. It can eliminate it entirely. GIS is income tested, and any extra RRIF income can reduce it dollar for dollar above certain thresholds. The same is true for provincial benefits tied to income, including some dental and drug coverage programs. So the people for whom withdrawing more is most dangerous aren't the ones with large RRIFs. They're the ones with modest savings who can least afford to lose those benefits. This is the piece that the just withdraw more advice misses completely. It's written for a certain income profile. If your profile is different, and most Canadians is, the advice doesn't apply. And if you follow it anyway, you could lose benefits that are worth more than the tax savings you were aiming for. So, if withdrawing the minimum quietly sets you up for bigger problems later, and withdrawing too much can cost you benefits now, what's the right move? That's what we're going to work through next. So what's the actual framework? It's simpler than most people expect, but it requires you to do one calculation first. Add up every source of income you're going to have in a given year, your CPP, your OAS, any workplace pension, the RRIF minimum based on your age and balance. That's your floor income, the amount you'll have coming in even if you don't touch a dollar extra. Then compare that number to $93,454. The gap between your floor income and that threshold is your safe withdrawal zone. It's the amount you can pull from your RRIF above the minimum without triggering the OAS clawback. You don't have to use all of it, but that's the ceiling that matters. Let me walk through a real example to make this concrete. Say you're 70 single with a $200,000 RRIF. You have $15,000 in CPP and $8,000 in OAS. If you convert to a RRIF and start withdrawals this year, the minimum at age 70 is roughly 4%, so about $8,000. Total income, $31,000. The gap to the clawback threshold is $93,454 minus $31,000, which is $62,454. You have $62,454 of room. That doesn't mean you should withdraw all of it. Your tax rate matters, and you need to think about what you actually need for living expenses. But it means you could withdraw an extra $20,000 this year, pay roughly $5,000 in tax at the combined federal and provincial rate, and take home $15,000 net. That $15,000 goes directly into your TFSA. Do that for 10 years. You've moved $150,000 into a tax-free account. Your RRIF balance is $200,000 lower than it would have been. At death, the tax hit on the RRIF is dramatically smaller, and everything in the TFSA passes to your beneficiaries without tax. I used to assume that staying at the minimum was the cautious choice. Then I worked through the numbers for someone with a $180,000 RRIF. A woman in her early 70s who was genuinely afraid of losing her GIS eligibility. We mapped out her income carefully. When we compared her floor income to the clawback threshold, she had room to withdraw an extra $8,000 a year without crossing into GIS reduction territory. Over 10 years, that extra withdrawal alone would reduce her estate's tax bill by roughly $40,000. She had been so focused on avoiding tax today that she was setting up a much larger tax bill for her kids. The minimum isn't always the safe choice. Sometimes it's the deferred bill. Now this framework assumes you have TFSA room to receive the net proceeds. If you don't, or if you're already above the clawback threshold, the strategy shifts. And what about people who are already at the limit, or near the GIS cutoff? That's a real scenario, and the next section gets into it. Because the clawback threshold itself doesn't stay still. Here's something that gives people false confidence. The OAS clawback threshold goes up every year. It's indexed to inflation. In 2020, it was $79,845. By 2026, it's $93,454. That's a 17% increase in 6 years. So people look at that and think, the government keeps raising it, so I'll be fine. But the threshold rising doesn't help you if your RRIF withdrawals are rising faster. Look at the minimum percentages again. At 71, you're withdrawing 5.28%. At 80, it's 6.82%. At 85, it's 8.51%. At 90, it's 11.92%. These percentages are fixed by the Income Tax Act. They don't adjust for inflation. So even in a modest growth environment, your RRIF balance can keep pace with or outgrow the increases in the threshold, especially if you're only taking the minimums and not spending the proceeds. And here's the actuarial reality that most people don't work into their planning. A 65-year-old Canadian man today has a life expectancy of about 87. For a woman, it's closer to 89. That means you're likely looking at 20 or more years of RRIF withdrawals. Over 20 years, even a modest portfolio grows significantly while the mandatory withdrawal rate keeps climbing. A $300,000 RRIF at age 65 that earns 4% per year, while you take only the minimums starting at 71, doesn't quietly shrink to zero. It can remain sizable, and the mandatory 8.51% withdrawal at age 85 on a $300,000 balance is $25,530 before you add CPP and OAS. For many retirees, that's the year they cross the clawback line for the first time, not because they made any different choices, just because time passed. This isn't a theoretical problem. It's a math problem with a predictable answer, and the answer gets worse the longer you wait to address it. The time to manage the RRIF balance is in your late 60s and early 70s. When your income is lower, your marginal rate is manageable, and you still have TFSA room to receive the proceeds. But here's the part that trips people up. Even when the math is clear, doing it is hard, and the reason comes down to how our brains work around tax. There are two paths you can take with a RRIF. They start in the same place, but they end up very differently. Path 1, you withdraw the minimum every year. The balance stays large, maybe even grows. Your income today stays low, which feels smart, but then age 80 arrives. The mandatory withdrawal rate jumps. Your RRIF has grown. The forced withdrawals push you over the clawback threshold. You're losing OAS you didn't plan to lose. And then, eventually, you die with a large RRIF balance. That entire remaining balance is counted as income in the year of death. It goes on your final tax return. At the highest marginal rate in your province, that could be 50% or more taken off the top. Your estate pays the bill. Your kids get what's left. Path 2, you withdraw strategically in your 60s and early 70s. You stay below the clawback threshold every year. You pay tax at your current marginal rate, which is likely lower than what your estate would pay later. The after-tax proceeds go into your TFSA, where they grow tax-free and pass to your beneficiaries without any tax at death. Your RRIF balance is lower, so the mandatory withdrawals are smaller, and you have much more control over your income in your 80s. The invisible cost in Path 1 is that every dollar you leave sitting in a RRIF past age 71 is a dollar that will eventually be taxed, and will be taxed at your highest marginal rate, either during your lifetime when you're forced to take it, or at death when you have no control over the timing at all. Every dollar you move to a TFSA now is a dollar that will never be taxed again. That's the trade-off. It's not between paying tax and avoiding tax. It's between paying tax at a rate you choose now versus paying tax at a rate the government determines later, with no say in the timing. And yes, some people worry, what if I need that RRIF money for an emergency? What if the market drops right after I withdraw? That's a legitimate concern, and it's the one we're going to stress test next. Let's put the strategy under real pressure, because retirement doesn't always go according to plan. Take a retiree at age 72 with a $400,000 RRIF and $50,000 in other income from CPP, OAS, and a small pension. That puts them below the clawback threshold, so they've been following the strategic drawdown, withdrawing an extra $20,000 per year above the minimum, paying roughly $5,000 in tax, and putting the $15,000 net into their TFSA. After 3 years, they have $45,000 in the TFSA. Then two things happen at once. The market drops 20%, and they need $30,000 for an urgent home repair, a roof that's been failing for years. If they hadn't been doing the strategic drawdown, here's how it plays out. Their RRIF is still close to $400,000. They need $30,000, so they withdraw $30,000 from the RRIF. That $30,000 adds to their $50,000 in other income, pushing their total to $80,000. Still below the clawback threshold, but their RRIF withdrawal happened at the worst possible moment. They sold investments in a down market to fund an expense. And if the RRIF keeps growing as the market recovers, next year's mandatory minimum is calculated on a higher balance again. Now compare that to the person who ran the strategic drawdown. They have $45,000 sitting in a TFSA. They take the $30,000 from there, tax-free, no impact on their CRA income, no clawback risk. Their RRIF doesn't need to be touched. The market recovers and the RRIF balance grows back. They've avoided a forced sale at a loss and kept their income clean for the year. According to the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada, around 40% of retirees face an unexpected expense over $5,000 within 5 years of retiring. That's not a rare edge case. That's close to a coin flip. The TFSA buffer that gets built up through strategic RRIF drawdowns isn't just about optimizing the estate. It's what gives you options when something goes wrong. The strategy works in theory, and as you can see, it actually works better in a crisis than the minimum withdrawal approach does. But knowing that doesn't make it easy to act on, and there's a specific psychological reason why. Here's the thing. Even after seeing all of that math, a lot of people still won't do it. And I don't think that's a knowledge problem. I think it's a wiring problem. Paying $5,000 in tax today feels like a loss. It's a real number, leaving your account right now. But not paying it today, and then paying $15,000 in tax later when you're forced to, doesn't feel like a loss yet. The brain treats future costs differently from present ones. The pain of paying now is sharper and more immediate than the theoretical pain of a larger bill later. This is especially true for people who spent decades being told that RRSPs are tax-deferred savings vehicles and that deferring tax is smart. That is true as long as you're deferring into a lower bracket. The moment you're deferring into a higher bracket or into your estate at the highest marginal rate, deferring becomes expensive. But the mental habit that served you in the accumulation phase can work against you in the drawdown phase. So if you're sitting here thinking, I know I should probably do this, but it still doesn't feel right to voluntarily pay more tax, that feeling is completely normal. It's not a sign that you're confused. It's a sign that your brain is working exactly as it was designed to. What helps is the reframe. Instead of thinking I'm paying tax now, think about it this way. You're prepaying tax at today's rate rather than your estate's rate later. If you're currently in a 25% marginal bracket, and your estate will pay 50% on what's left in the RRIF, then every dollar you withdraw now and redirect to a TFSA effectively costs you 25 cents today and saves you 50 cents later. That's not a tax bill. That's a guaranteed 25-cent gain per dollar moved. I don't know every detail of your financial situation, but the math of marginal rates is the same for everyone. The best time to start this was 5 years ago. The second best time is this year, before another RIF withdrawal cycle passes. So let's talk about exactly how to do it. All right, let's make this practical. 3 steps, and you can do all 3 before your next RRIF withdrawal. Step 1. Calculate your floor income. This is the income you'll receive this year without withdrawing anything extra from your RRIF. Add up your CPP, your OAS, any pension income, and the mandatory minimum from your RRIF, which you can calculate using the CRA's published minimum withdrawal table based on your age and your January 1st balance. Add those numbers together. That's your floor. Now compare it to $93,454. That gap is your safe withdrawal zone. It's the amount you can take out of your RRIF above the minimum without triggering the OAS clawback. Write that number down. Step 2. Determine how much you should actually withdraw. The gap tells you the ceiling. The right amount depends on a few more things: your tax bracket, your TFSA contribution room, and whether you'll need liquid assets in the next year or two. A rough approach: withdraw up to the point where the after-tax proceeds roughly equal your available TFSA contribution room for the year. That way, every dollar you pull out above the minimum goes straight into tax-free shelter. For example, if your income is $60,000 and the threshold is $93,454, you have room to withdraw up to $33,454 extra. But if you only have $20,000 in TFSA contribution room, it may make sense to limit the extra withdrawal to the amount that produces $20,000 after tax and roll the rest into the following year when room resets. Step 3. Redirect, then repeat. Withdraw the extra amount, pay the tax on your next return, and move the after-tax proceeds into your TFSA. If your TFSA is full, a non-registered account works too. It's not as clean, but the investment income is still better handled there than in a RRIF. Repeat the same calculation next January. Your RRIF minimum will change as your balance changes, so recalculate the gap each year. One more thing, if you're already over the clawback threshold, the strategy looks different. In that case, you're not trying to stay under a line, you're trying to reduce the overall RRIF balance as quickly as makes sense. Because every year you delay is another year of forced withdrawals at the highest rate. That scenario deserves its own careful look, and I'll cover it in a follow-up video. If you want to be notified when that comes out, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The playbook for retirees who are already in clawback territory is more nuanced, but the core principle is the same. Paying tax now at a rate you control is almost always better than paying it later at a rate that's set for you. Now let's bring it all together. So here's where we land. The blanket advice to withdraw more than the minimum is incomplete at best and expensive at worst for most Canadians. The right move isn't to withdraw more, it's to withdraw the right amount, at the right time, for the right reason. Use the clawback threshold as your ceiling. Calculate your floor income, find the gap, and make deliberate withdrawals that reduce your RRIF balance while keeping your benefits intact. Redirect the after-tax proceeds to your TFSA so the money keeps working for you, tax-free, and passes to your family without a CRA bill attached. Retirement planning isn't about maximizing any single account. It's about making your CPP, OAS, RRIF, and TFSA work as a system. When you look at them together, the right strategy becomes much clearer. When you treat them as separate buckets, you leave gaps, and the CRA is very happy to fill those gaps for you. If this video helped you see the RRIF picture more clearly, hit like and subscribe. And if you have a specific question about your own situation, drop it in the comments. I do read them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.